the victims were completely ignored. He believes
alleged victims. I suppose, the victims of Epstein. Yes,
no,
indeed.
Epstein's victims. No. He totally ignored them. But what is so extraordinary is that you have phrases when you're trying to appeal to an audience. You want an audience, after all, who don't know you very well, to be on your side. And you actually say, I let the side down. You talk about conduct not becoming. I'm kicking myself on. What is he doing? The one thing, the only thing that he admits he's done wrong, the only thing is in 2010 to have stayed with Epstein after he was released from prison, and absolutely nothing else. And the extraordinary thing is he doesn't see that he lost his job as UK Special Trade Envoy because of this friendship. He's too stupid.
Well, you've robbed me of the opportunity to ask you that very question, Richard. I was going to say, people have speculated, posited that Andrew came a cropper because he's not very bright and Emily Maitlis is. And you clearly take that view.
Well, Emily Maitlis undoubtedly is, although, of course, I do think that the negotiations for this, apparently they lasted months. It seems to have been agreed, or it didn't crop up, because I think this is very germane. Some papers have pointed it out this morning. Sarah Ferguson, Andrew's ex-wife. Epstein provided £15,000, reportedly in late 2010, which she called, accepting it, a gigantic error of judgment. Yes. Evening Standard, 7th March 2011. Now, that is a very relevant point, and that should have come up. The whole thing is an absolute atrocity. That it should take place in Buckingham Palace is simply completely bizarre. His language is unbelievable. And as for the snobbery of it, it's one thing to talk about a shooting party, and then, of course, when
just a normal shooting party.
Well, yes, a stand.
Could you give some sort of insight into the character of Prince Andrew in terms of the advice he receives?
Yeah.
Now, he specifically hired Amber Rudd's old advisor, Jason Stein, as his publicity advisor several months before. Jason, we know, told him, do not do this Newsnight interview. And
PR's his own PR.
Yeah, and when Andrew was advised by his private secretary, Amanda Thirsk, to go ahead with it, Jason Stein quit. Now, that is a serious thing. Why do you think he went ahead with this? What is it about his personality that makes him do this?
I think it is, firstly, that we mentioned this before. I think he is genuinely a rather stupid person. I think he was a very brave pilot in the Falklands. I think in the Navy, I think it suited him. I think that's a fair comment. But it's worthwhile remembering, if you watch that interview, I've watched it twice for my sins, by the way, and you see the...
You must have done something very bad in your life, Richard, if you got that many sins to atone for.
It was compelling television.
It really, really is awful. But if you actually look at the way he's talking and the way he's putting an argument, remember, he's supposed to be speaking to people. He's got a global audience. He's the Buckingham expletive-deleted palace. Yeah. That's the problem with this. And what it is about his character, firstly, he's self-righteous. Yeah. I think he's a bit of a...
arrogant.
He's a bit of a snob. And I think he's a thoroughly undesirable type.
Could I ask, Richard, because while younger listeners may not appreciate it, I know that Kevin and myself and you too will be fully aware of the impact that Princess Diana's famous interview with Martin Bashir, currently disgracing himself on the X Factor celebrity, but it had a massive impact, the Diana interview. And how would you equate the two? Which one will have the longest reaching consequences?
Well, I mean, just if I may, just to bring in one more interview. Firstly, Diana, Charles has done a disaster because he admitted adultery, and he also stirred up problems by talking about Defender of Faith.
Yes.
And now that was an admitted catastrophe. Diana's was... it was wonderfully dramatic. Over, I think, 22 million people watched it. It is true that within...
Prince Andrew's is 1.7 million, I believe, after Saturday night.
Yes, but you must remember the trails. I mean, that was going
Yes.
on all day, and also there'll be catch-up.
Of
People
course.
will want to know. You remember the people will want to know what they missed. I mean, if you've got a bucket of sick and you want to see it on screen, then catch up, because you can catch up. So that 1.7 will be, I think, several times
Yes,
over.
for sure.
At least they'll have seen bits of it. They won't have endured the entire hour. No.
But in terms of
No.
in terms of lasting impact, which will be the most important?
Obviously, that was extremely significant as far as she was concerned, and but it has never been forgotten. And some of the phrases, by the way, beautifully, Three in a Marriage and Queen of People's Hearts and so on, have gone down in the English language.
Yes.
I mean, the only thing that people will remember from this is the proverbial sick bag, however you wish to phrase it, or indeed, I mean, these ghastly phrases of his, about being honourable. The point is that guy is not up to it, and frankly, the less he does from now on, the better, and people won't take him seriously. He is a liability to the royal family, and he has genuinely harmed the monarchy.
I disagree about the Lorraine Kelly point, by the way.
On what point?
I don't think she was brilliant. She jumped down our Curie's throat, saying that she actually hadn't answered any questions. But what I'd say in response to that is, where's Boris?
Well,
He's not
very good
even
point.
bothered to... listen, this woman doesn't actually have to answer the details of what that relationship was. She's admitted that there was a relationship that was more than friends. But what we're looking at, like the media and society, we want to know the nitty-gritty about, how long it was going on for, how sexual this relationship was. That's not important. Boris has crossed the line, and he's not an honest prime minister, and yet Lorraine Kelly is, speaking down to our Curie for having spoken up, and I think that's the system we need to break.
I wouldn't know for sure, but I know that her previous appearance on television involved the transference of a reasonably large sum of money into her bank account, and it might well be that the paymasters, if she has them on ITV
I disagree.
or Good Morning
I
Britain...
don't actually think they are talking about wanting to know the nitty-gritty of the sex stuff. I think they want to know why public money went to this woman. I think that's a genuine question, right?
Sure, of course, that's a genuine question, but that wasn't the question that I saw her, unless I've not seen all of the footage, I just saw her field questions about the relationship. So I got the impression that Lorraine Kelly was angry that she hadn't answered questions about the nature of the relationship.
And the secret barrister called this Tory election pledge a lie. In print, he called it a lie. Why? Well, one, because it won't apply to all or even most child killers, says the secret barrister, only adults who commit murder. And furthermore, I can't remember what the other party was complaining about. Furthermore, that's it, the law already provides for whole life tariffs for adults who murder children. So if the law is already there and already does the job, what is Robert Buckland promising us? Well, here to discuss is former Chief Superintendent from the Met, a friend of Talk Radio, Dal Babu. Good afternoon to you, Dal.
Good afternoon, Matthew.
Good afternoon. So, is this a new thing that the Justice Secretary, Robert Buckland, is putting forward?
Well, I think you've already done an excellent summary.
Thank you very much.
You made me superfluous here.
Oh, no,
I think
no
Thanks for
way.
coming on, Dal.
No way. No.
But I think you made the key points. The key points is that you can use that power to sentence somebody to life imprisonment. In fact, for murder, there is only one. It's life imprisonment. The number of years may vary, but essentially it's life imprisonment. Actually, I'm not entirely sure what is different from what the government is doing to what is happening now. So it does seem to be a bit of an election play. And actually, with all of these things, I think you just need to look in the details. I think they're playing on emotion, because obviously the worst thing any of us can think of is having our child murdered, and you'd want the most severe sentence against the individual.
So, I suppose...
Not sure what's different, though.
Well, I guess there's a broader debate to be had between whole life sentences where there is no chance of parole and a life sentence where the judge will hand down the number of years you would expect to serve before parole is a possibility. And as I understand it, Dal, it's always 15 years or more, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at you end up that sort of when people say life sentences, I think once you get to 12 years, people start looking at that unless the specific requirements that somebody's sentence is. So, for example, with the Jodie murder, today the judge talked about a minimum of 26 years.
Yeah.
And so that sort of gives you an indication of sort of something wrong. But the
Yes.
reality of the situation is, no matter what somebody is sentenced to, there's always the opportunity to look at whether that sentence is done fairly. So in terms of what we have now at the moment, where judges have that discretion, ultimately it's down to the judge. The judge has that discretion of introducing more severe sentence, and to what the government is now proposing, I don't think there's any difference whatsoever. It does seem to be a bit of smoke and mirrors and focusing on emotion.
Could I broaden it out a little, Dull, to ask your opinion on essentially no parole sentences? I mean, the foundations of our judicial system, which I think we both agree is seriously flawed and damaged at the moment, starved of resources.
Absolutely.
But the premise is that we both punish and we rehabilitate in prison. And I suppose that ever since we abolished capital punishment, the notion has been that the state has to be a bigger player than mere mortals hacking and killing at one another. Can I ask you, as a former police officer, senior ranking police officer, are you comfortable with just locking people up with no prospect of release?
Well, I mean, that's what they do in countries like Iraq and Iran, in Russia. You know, so we are a...
None of which are on my holiday destination list, I have to say.
Well, we are a humane country, and I think it's quite right that people are punished, and I don't think any of us would say that people shouldn't be punished. I think the issue is that at some stage people will come out of prison at some stage. It may be in many years' time, it may be 15, 20 years, but at some stage people come out. And so I think an important part of the prison system is the need to rehabilitate individuals, because all that will happen otherwise is that dangerous people will come out and they're likely to commit further offences.
Story in the papers today saying that your time at Ant and Dec Saturday Night Takeaways.
Yeah, I don't know why this is a big story, because actually it hasn't been on for a year. 2 years, because it wasn't on this year either. It's not like a rolling contract or anything. But I mean, they're just changing the format of the show. My bit was sort of like Challenge Annika, where I was running out to people's houses and getting in helicopters and they're taking that out. And I mean, I think it's still going to be amazing with Ant and Dec and Stephen. I mean, what a trio of men. I feel like I'm still going to tune in and watch.
I've never seen it.
You need to. Honestly,
Never seen it.
Do you know what? There's not many shows where it's family friendly, and I feel like Ant and Dec Saturday Night Takeaway is one of those rarities where you can all sit down as a family and enjoy it.
Do you think with you and Ant and Dec it was all a bit too Newcastle-y?
Oh yeah, because nobody on the TV's from South, are they? There's absolutely no one with southern accents on the TV, is there? Get rid of the few northerners that there is.
I know, exactly. We've got to fly the flag.
We have.
I think you've touched on it, committed a massive act of
really
regionalism.
You're actually
Nothing
being
wrong with Newcastle.
You're
I'm
being
just saying.
northist. You're being northist.
Other regions are available. That's what I'm saying.
What about the political dirty tricks we're seeing? I mean, last night, it seems to be the biggest story to have come from the leaders' debate is Conservative Party press office is rebranding, renaming its official Twitter account to Fact Check UK. Just as the election debate got underway, Twitter says the Tories misled the public.
Well, I think that's very important because it's part of a pattern of conduct of devious behaviour by the Conservative Party and its chairman, James Cleverly. It's very notable that they didn't fact-check, of course, the lies being told by Boris Johnson about the 40 new hospitals and things like that.
Which became 4.
But they did... and remember that they now have a record of this deliberate deceit on social media. They did it when they misrepresented, they twisted and doctored a video about
Keir Starmer, wasn't it? Yeah.
And so James Cleverly refuses to apologise for this. He says he's doing the right thing. Well, what he's doing is twisting and doctoring and manipulating in order to deceive voters. And I don't think we should put up with that. I think that it's important to realise that political lying is a form of theft, because you're taking away the democratic rights of voters, because voters are entitled to make their judgments on the basis of truthful statements.
Absolutely.
And if you're making them on the basis of lies or distortions, they're having their democratic rights stolen from them.
Can I...
And that, I'm afraid, is what Mr. Johnson's Conservative Party set out to do last night, deliberately, quite deliberately.
Twitter said they misled the public.
Yeah, they blatantly pretended to be neutral. Isn't that tantamount to sort of rather serious electoral corruption?
Absolutely. I think it's a huge problem, and everyone listening to this will agree that the party of government faking its identity to push out misinformation and distort a conversation in favour of Boris Johnson during the first leaders' debate just simply isn't okay.
So
we should ask for more.
Dominic Raab says no one gives a toss. That direct quote. No one gives a toss. And yet, about what goes on social media, and yet we're talking about the Tories changing their social media name, their perception. So doesn't that prove that Dominic Raab isn't so? If nobody gave a toss, why would Tory press office change their identity? That would suggest they give a toss.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And to be honest, I've got no idea what was going on in the minds of all of the people in Conservative Party HQ who signed this off, because there must have been a few of them. But what I'm really concerned about is the effect that this has on democracy. Right now, we're really at rock bottom in terms of public trust in political parties, in information, in news. And what this does, it doesn't just further undermine trust in political parties, it also undermines trust in information. And more importantly than that, it undermines trust in real fact-check sites, which are helping people navigate this kind of misinformation. And I think that's really appalling. This gets really, really dirty. And just to be clear, it doesn't have to be this way. If politicians and political parties really care about democracy, and if they have any respect for the people who they're trying to get to vote for them, then they could commit to fighting a clean election. To be clear, this isn't normal. This isn't normal for the UK, and it's not normal anywhere else in the world. I've been looking at disinformation and fake news for a really long time, and I have never, ever seen a Democratic Party do anything like we saw last night.
Truly.
Even Donald Trump?
I haven't seen what we saw last night.
That's
amazing.
That's a showstopper, that one. Gosh. How do you ascertain what is true and what is not true? How do you do it?
So there are these brilliant fact-check platforms. So Full Fact is a really good one, and you can go onto their real Twitter feeds, and they're checking all of this information. And then personally, when I have time, I'll do all of the research that I can to do that. But, you know, we can't expect every member of the public to do that on every tweet they come across. Like, it just isn't the world that we live in anymore.
What do you think is going to happen? God forbid, the thought of having another general election before 5 years is out. Let's hope to God we go 5 years, a reasonable period of time before the next election. I've already got that sort of worrying feeling in the pit of my stomach that what you're going to see then is more of this, not less, that all the parties will be getting up to it because they've seen the impact, and I'm guessing that it's viewed as positive. I mean, did rebranding Tory press on Twitter, did it work for the Tories? I suppose that's an interesting question, isn't it? We're going to talk about, sending out lies and misdirecting the public. We should ask, did it work? What benefit did the Tories get from it last night? Would it work? Did it work for them, do you think?
I mean, I don't know what their objective was. If their objective was to confuse everyone and for no one to know what was going on and everyone to be talking about something else, then yes, it probably did work. But I think it's undermined trust in them, trust in the political system in its entirety, and trust in democracy in such a hugely important way.
So next election, would you expect it to be cleaner? Assuming it's 5 years. I mean, I can't... we're not going to entertain any other day. It's 5 years. 2024, do you expect the election to be nastier and dirtier than this one, or a little bit cleaner?
Well, whoever wins this election, I really hope that they can sort out regulation. Right now, we're clearly in a place where laws and regulation are way behind what we're seeing happening in the democratic sphere.
Do you think that's deliberate or accidental? That our political leaders have been quite happy not to push our legislation to bring it up to speed with everything that's going on in say, new media?
maybe it's a bit of both. I think it has been moving really, really fast, and it is hard to bring in laws. It takes a long time, and Brexit has meant that hardly any laws have come in the last few years anyway. But I think we're clearly seeing that parties are benefiting from that right now, and it looks like a race to the bottom. In addition to what we saw from the Conservative Party last night, we've also seen Lib Dems using some very questionable stats. We've seen
relating to what? I'm just interested to try and get a bit of balance here, because we've had an awful lot about how the Tories are mucking around. What kind of stats have the Lib Dems been?
So specifically in marginal seats, there have been kind of polling that has shown that the Lib Dems are just on the verge of winning, when actually in the last election the voter turnout showed something very, very different. We've also seen a Labour MP was accused of being part responsible for Grenfell, even though she wasn't in post when that happened, and no one's taking back these completely false accusations, even though that's now been referred to the police. We saw the doctored video of Keir Starmer.
Keir Starmer, from Good Morning Britain. It's obvious the royal family must be responsible for some tourist value to the UK, but can you ascertain, have you been able to ascertain, Norman, what the royal family brings, net value, cash value to the UK?
Well, I expect it's negative given the amount of money we spend on them, because it's probably... No, seriously, I mean, we're paying 82 million a year from the sovereign grant. There's then an estimated £200,000 to £300,000 for security on top of that. And just those two items alone will cancel out that figure, even if it is correct. But I would say to your anonymous emailer or caller that the royal palace in Europe, which gets the most visitors, is Versailles, and the French got rid of their monarchy in 1848. And I don't really think we should base our constitutional arrangements on what tourists like.
Were you expecting to get an MBE or OBE anytime soon, Norman?
I don't think that's likely to come my way, no.
Do you think...
But, I mean, where's the British Empire? This is the thing. Wow. I mean, come out of the British Empire. What's that? Rockall? And,
just about. What about... I've made my position quite clear. I'm a Republican and always have been. Can we... do you think... We heard earlier, it was Katie Nicholl, wasn't it? She was suggesting that with Andy out of the picture, Charles coming to the throne, you might have a much more streamlined royal family, whatever. I mean, you used to call it the civil list, but it's the Queen's stipend. That would all be massively reduced. Do you foresee that we could start emulating the royal family to, say, the Netherlands?
Well, I think we should do, and irrespective of your view or my view, I think the majority of the British people, if I sense it right, are prepared to have a monarchy, and even support a monarchy, but they don't want one with all the hangers-on and all the bells and whistles and the special exemptions which exist. I think if people read my book, they'll be horrified by some of the tax exemptions and favours which the royal family is even now able to call in, as if it was, we're still behaving as if it was 1710. Some of these privileges go back centuries and never been changed. So it needs to be updated. It needs to be far more modern. I was in Sweden, and I was at a party in Sweden, and I got chatting to this woman. 10 minutes into the conversation, it turned out she was a member of the Swedish royal family. You can't imagine that sort of, cavalier engagement. Over here we have to line up for them all, to meet them one by one.
Bowing and curtsying along the way. Norman Baker, lovely talking to you, the former Liberal Democrat Transport Minister, and what a fascinating read, because it's kind of been... It's often spoke in journalistic circles that the one area of sort of scrutiny that never gets exposed to the light is what the royal family costs us, how the money is spent, how they accrue their wealth. It's shrouded in sort of mystery, secrecy and history, and it's really good to hear that somebody at last is holding them to the light. The book is called And What Do You Do? What the Royal Family Don't Want You to Know. Where was your last retail job?
Last retail job was in Levi, Covent Garden.
Okay. And
that was the last
ago?
one. So I left in April 2017. Yeah.
So, since then, you've had hit TV shows on Channel 4, Loving Your Work with Big Nasty. You've gone out, you've done a tour, which then went on Netflix, which means you've gone global.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, and now you are on a world tour.
Yeah.
Off the back
and you're the funniest man in Britain, according to the Times.
That's what the Times says, but I have an uncle that will just always dispute that. So every time there's a family thing, he's like, he ain't the funniest guy. I'm the funniest guy in this family. I'm like, you are, innit? But the Times didn't say that about you, innit? When we had the show in Glasgow, that was one of my favourite shows. We had this guy get on stage, he took off his top and stuff. It was a bit nuts.
I think we saw the same guy at Still Game.
Yeah, but I liked it. It just changes the show a little bit. This guy just got up. He's like, "Read me, my name's Steve, man." I was like, "All right, Steve, do what you're doing."